Okay, so just a brief introduction to this panel on building digital collections, Jewish digital collections. So my name is Lena, Stanley-Clamp, and I'm coordinator of Judaica Europeana, which is a network of organizations and institutions and collections that work together to integrate access to Jewish collections. The format of the session will be that our presenter, Violet Radnofsky, will speak for 20 minutes, and then the other members of the panel each will speak for about 15 minutes. So just a quick introduction. Violet Radnofsky is the Literature Hebraica Technical and Research Librarian in the Judaica Division at Library at Harvard University. And her work has been to develop Harvard Judaica holdings through collaboration with other institutions and private collections. So, Violet, over to you.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure and honor to be the guest of the National Library of Israel. It's coming home. I would like to start with a little bit of history of the building a Judaica collection and what was the logic and the philosophy and policy behind it. So Harvard Judaica collection development and access policy are guided by four key elements. To recognize the importance of all information sources, information must be collected in all formats and media types, including books, pamphlet, periodical, ephemera, such poster, broadcast, photograph, microfilms, sound recordings, video and soft copy data, such as web content and digital documents. Critical mass, to collect enough primary material that will provide a critical mass that sustain current research, create opportunity for new research, and anticipate the future needs for scholar. Timely collecting the increasing amount of ephemeral materials in real time or as close to their publication or production as possible is critical because they quickly disappear. Materials such as soft copy documents cannot be accessed or acquire past their published life. And the fourth element is the access. Accessing all those materials via shared point of access with research materials located in different locations and institutions, access for scholar can be limited or virtually impossible. Therefore, stringing these copies together under one virtual roof make it possible for scholars to have access to material that otherwise will be inaccessible. The collection, the Harvard Judaica Digital Collection began in 1994. And I would like, as I mentioned, to take a few minutes to go through the details of that process from 1994 to 2014. So in 1994, the Judaica Division at Harvard College embarked on a long-term project utilizing digital imaging technology to resolve issues concerning the division collection of Israeli and Judaica posters and ephemera. The goal of the project was to provide a pragmatic solution to issues such as access, archiving, and storage of this vast collection of posters. And remember, that was only poster at that point. And to gain bibliographical control over the materials, we selected Kodak Photo CD technology as a primary archival medium. Using a content management system facilitated access to the collection and enabled scholars to gain online access to the entire collection. In 1994, at this point, the Judaica collection has over 3 decades of accumulating Israeli posters. Harvard collection of Israeli poster, a unique research tool of studying culture, Israeli culture and Judaica, and the collection span on all Israeli society aspects: music, theater, education, politics, religious affair, art, advertising, sport, national and local government, and more. Initially, the collection was stored in a closed-off area in Widener library stacks. The collection was not accessible due to its location and to lack of cataloging data. We had only a rough idea of the collection's size and content. Our initial estimate of the collection was around 20,000 posters. In reality, we digitized 70,000 posters in the first stage of the project. Small ephemera, current acquisition of Israeli election ephemera that had been microfilmed were not included in this stage. It was clear to us that to provide online access to the collection was the only practical solution to its preservation and access problems. And remember, we're still 1994. This digital solution provided us with many advantages, including long-term digital archive, data integrity, preservation of the original items, and access. The long-term digital archive, at that point where we were talking about also the option was in a memory institution was the microfilm, we thought that digital images will not be deteriorate. And if you have a policy of a long-term migration, you be able to migrate smoothly from one format to another. Therefore, a microfilm will not be an option. Also, in terms of deterioration of the image itself, deterioration of the microfilm or access the microfilm, impossible in the way that digital images. And I have to remind you that was 1994, where people in preservation in memory institutions, including Harvard, were against digitizing anything. There was a fear of that medium that it's disappeared, it's high maintenance, and a microfilm, that's what we know. We have to go with that. So by 1998, the collection included over 200,000 images. The large amounts of images could not be supported using the old software. With a library-wide solution still in the planning stage, we had to migrate the collection to a different content management solution, one that will be, and that we were the only collection at Harvard that was digitized at that point, on one that would be able to support this large amount of images, allow for future growth, and support a variety of media formats. While preparing for transition, we had to consider our new reality. First, we had to provide adequate storage for the 2,000 photo CD discs that until then were stored in our office. Second, we had to consider the impact of the internet on the way that we served our user then and in the future. Users who required instant access to the materials and browser-based viewing. So to gain control over the collection, we selected an off-the-shelf software by Canto. It's Cumulus Desktop Plus. And again, it's all desktop in our division, not a university-wide solution. But the advantage of that is that we could allow people to still by appointment, but in an easy way to use it because we migrated all the photo CDs into that system, and we created a small digital repository with a JPEG format that it was a standalone system, but people can use it and access it by appointment from 9 to 5. During that time, the Judaica collection continued to grow. Posters, ephemera, photographs were added to the collection on a regular basis, and we continued to digitize the materials as we acquired them to prevent a backlog of material that needed to be digitized. The turning point, 2006 to 2014, transition to a library-wide solution for content manager system and digital repository. In 2006, the library developed a database called VIA that allowed us to move from our desktop operation by appointment to a web capability that opened up a new opportunity in terms of more efficient workflow. This was also a turning point in the growth of the collection. As we continue to collect the paper and born digital images, mainly in Israel, we needed a partner in Israel that would enable us to organize, catalog, and digitize the material in Israel before it arrived to Harvard. And the partner company was, and still is, Dantec. This allows us to migrate our desktop database to a library-wide solution via Visual Information Access, and moving our images from a local hard drive to Harvard Digital Repository, the DRS, at this time in JPEG 2000 format. All conversions, both technical and intellectual metadata, were made by Dantec, working with Harvard Library Information Specification. The library infrastructure also allows us to continue expanding our collection through collaboration with other institutions, both private and public. And that started the era where Harvard joined project. While catching up with digitizing Judaica on special collection, we began to see that there were many photo collections in other archives that needed digitization in order to facilitate access, otherwise rendering them as inaccessible. Joint projects were important in many levels, allowing hidden collection to become available, shared financial resources, digital backup in several places in the world, making the collection secure both in terms of preservation and access. And some example, Central Zionist Archive and the Jewish National Fund, extensive archive of photographs documenting Jewish history, each having 500,000 negatives, with both eager to digitize their collection and having been doing so with limited funds, making it impossible to complete the project without a partner. The nature of the collaboration was that Harvard received a copy of the digital format. The archives also receive a digital format according to their spec, with the archive providing the cataloging. Betty Galalon project is a Galil project, is about over 1 million images from the kibbutzim in the Galil. Center for Jewish Art is a joint project with the National Library of Israel and with the Project Tzionei Derech and with the Center for Jewish Art, with about 200,000 images. A cartoon museum, about 150,000 in the area in theater, entertainment, and photojournalism. We have continued to develop photographs collection with many private photographers, archives such as Eyal Landesman, Gerard Dallon, Yossi Tzveker, Yaakov Agor, Reuven Milon, and many, many more. Israel Aramati, all numbering over 4 million images. Digital collection is a natural progression of collection development policy and is an integral part of the collection. We also continue to collect and digitize all paper-related ephemera, encompassing all aspects of Jewish life around the world. So what's the next big thing? The Judaica digital collection developed in a natural progression. The 4 key elements that guided us are still relevant as they were in 1994. Recognizing the importance of all information sources, critical mass, timely collection, and access. So what's really next? In 2014, the Judaica collection contained over 6 million images, over 50,000 digital audio, over 20,000 digital video, 117,000 maps, over 1 million digital microfilm frames. So while accumulating a critical mass of digital assets, the natural progression is to make it available in all possibility that digital formats allows, which are at this point OCR for text, and caption for video and audio in multiple languages with text search capability and linked data. Adapting SMAC, Social Mobile Analytic Cloud, on one integrated stack where each function enables another to maximize their effect. This is the new IT model, delivering in an organization that is more connective, collaborative, real-time, and productive. What does it mean to the memory institution? It means that all our digital collection will be available at any discovery system with any technology now in use and in the future, creating new opportunities for research, interdisciplinary and cross-cultural. The mandate is still the same. Memory institutions are in charge of documenting society with a critical mass of information forever. Over the last 20 years, what did we learn from building a robust digital collection? So far, we have all formats require different processes. Paper, including analog formats that have been converted to digital, as well as born digital. We cannot, nor do we need to predict when one format disappeared and new one appear, as we always in transition period, whether moving out from analog environment to digital one or moving out from one digital environment to a new one. We collect and preserve what is available now, focusing on all formats of information, not all in saved, regardless to whatever paper, video, audio, or born digital. We don't need to predict what the future technology will be, since we're moving on to a newer one on a regular basis. New technology brings more opportunity to be efficient in collecting, processing, preserving, and accessing, and therefore to do more. We're in the era of information explosion, and it's exciting and challenging for memory institutions. The technology that created that wealth of information is our greatest tool to achieve our objectives. But in order to accomplish our mission now more than ever, we need to collaborate to document Jewish civilization. Thank you.
Yes, shalom. I'm also very grateful for the National Library to invite me here and to give me the chance to give you an overview of the digital collections of the Frankfurt University Library. Maybe for those who don't know yet, the Frankfurt University Library is the special collection for Jewish studies in Germany. That means we are funded by the German Research Foundation in order to collect everything that is worth for a library, which means mostly printed material for Jewish studies in all languages and from all over the world, to be the repository, the resource for whole of Germany, that wherever you don't find anything, you'll find it in Frankfurt. So since 1950, after the war, the library is buying books and if they get materials and other materials. And we have started in the end of the 19th, in 1990, with digitizing our historic material, our historic resources. Not digital born, only the historic. And we have, meantime, until now, we have 7 databases in Jewish studies, and they are part of the digital collections of the Frankfurt University Library. We were the first in the library, and I also think for Germany, for Jewish studies certainly, but also general, I think 1998 for Germany was quite early to start digitized material. And as I said, the focus was on digitizing the historic resources that are free of access. We have in Germany a very tight, very severe copyright issue. So we have to be very careful, and we try to digitize the historic resources that were, as Violet said already, normally difficult to access and very fragile, of course, for their content already. And we started, and we have, and you see here already our policy that we started then, and we do it today, that every database has its content, and sometimes there are different databases because of the different content, but it's one version of presentation and also of software behind it. So there's one search engine, it's one structure, and you could access, we are working with the same technical equipment, but we present it in different forms. So the idea was, as we call it, one portal, but many collections. The variety for the collections depend on different aspects. For example, we differ in libraries between print and manuscripts. So the newest or the nearly in 2012 and 13, we added, you see the light green, we added 2 collections of Hebrew manuscripts and Hebrew incunabula. We started with Yiddish prints, and we moved from 1998 until today to these 7 collections. So here I've tried to make a very, for this lecture, very rough timeline. We started in 1998. As I said, we have a collection of Yiddish prints from the 16th century to modern times. We took until 19th century. End of 19th century, and the reason then was that the books were very fragile and people wanted to use them, and they were very and people had to come from all over to our library. So this was the first. We started as an experiment. We did it on our own in the library. And since then, we've moved on. And as I said, it's either the collections differ because of the type of material, if it's manuscript or if it's printed. Of course, the language, because many people studying Jewish studies are not, or in Germany still don't read German, and don't read Hebrew. So we have to divide the collections. So we have in Hebrew letters, you have the Yiddish prints, you have the Hebrew manuscripts, and you have the Hebrew incunabula that are on the one hand, you can search within every database by itself, but you can also search all over them all together. Then the reason for digitizing is either the fragility or it's a high frequency of use, that all the time we had to lend out these books or periodicals, and of course the value. For the manuscripts, if you want to look into a manuscript, it's always a whole procedure. And this way you can see it through the internet. The databases are sometimes, of course, also originate by different support. We started on our own, which is the library and the DFG, the German Research Foundation. In the meantime, we got money also from Judaica Europeana, and from an international cooperation with NEH, with the library, with the Leo Baeck Institute and the Center for Jewish History. Every database, and this is maybe also the main reason for the difference that we don't put them all together, has a different level of indexing. You can do different things with different collections. For example, the Hebrew manuscripts and the Hebrew incunabula are now have titles and authors in Hebrew script already, so you can search in Hebrew. The Freimann collection is the collection of the pre-war collection of the Frankfurt University Library, which was then the largest collection on the European continent and was built by Aaron Freimann, is being digitized according to the catalog he left behind. We have a catalog of the Judaica printed in 1932. And this catalog shows us what is still in the library and what has been destroyed during the war. So it's not only digitized. You can, of course, look for keywords or for authors or whatever, but you can also, when you're in the database, you can also work like on an imaginative shelf. you can go through topics, through the index of the catalog, and you can move along. So it's a different level of indexing. The Rothschild collection, which is the last one we added, it's a collection of 20,000 newspaper articles from all over the world concerning the Rothschild family. Has been done OCR completely, so you can do a full text search. And that's why we also don't have the idea of putting all these databases together, because for the search it's no different. But for working with it and for specific interests, I think it makes sense to keep them apart. And the one thing I think which is also the difference is we have digital collections which are a different technical version of collections in the library. And we have digital collections which are virtual collections. That meaning they combine virtually collections that are not existing like this anymore in reality. And our two virtual collections are Compact Memory and the Freimann collection. Compact Memory is a database of German Jewish periodicals. And the idea was not just to digitize the journals we have, but of course, first of all, to complement and to present the journals in the complete form. So we have missing parts, other libraries have missing parts. We have parts that are on microfilms, that are in the original, that are copies from other libraries. And the user wants a certain article in a certain newspaper or periodical, and he wants it, of course, as complete as possible. So this is a virtual collection, and it, as we call it, it was for many, many years our runner, our best sale. We have a high level of usage, we know this. And just 2 months ago, we enlarged it. There were 120 German Jewish periodicals, and since 4 weeks or 6 weeks ago, we have 172 periodicals online, which we have added. So it's a virtual collection. You won't find this collection in any library in the world like this. And I think this is one of the things also that you use the internet, that you not only, on the one hand, of course, as we started, it's a way of access and a way of keeping your originals. But on the other hand, of course, it offers a lot of opportunities. And one of the opportunities is to combine things that in the reality are not like this anymore. And the second is the Freimann collection, which is also a virtual collection, because, as I said, it's our pre-war collection, which made the name of the Frankfurt University Library, and was also the reason for Germany to put the special collection of Jewish studies to the Frankfurt University Library and not to some other library. But some of the books in this Freimann collection are missing, about 20–25%. And we tried to... we are still trying, it's a project ongoing, to find the missing books and to digitize them and to put them into the Freimann collection. And this is was our project. We had a project together with, as I said, the Center for Jewish History and the LBI. And they have digitized for us 1,000 books that were part of the Freimann collection that are not in Frankfurt anymore, and have transported sent us. They digitized it in New York. They send us the TIFFs. We import the images. We import the metadata, and we present it within the Freimann collection. So these are the main characteristics. And of course, libraries also differ between periodicals. That's why Compact Memory is the journals, and the Freimann collection. Also, it's also German Jewish heritage. Is a special collection about printed books. As I said, these two virtual collections are Compact Memory, beginning by German institutions, but now also with the LBI, and I hope we'll find other partners to complete it. And the other one is the Freimann collection, also with New York. And financed by different financing companies, by the library, by the German Research Association, by the European Commission, and also by a commercial Abbey software house, because they gave us for free the Abbey software for OCR, for example, for the Rothschild collection. We got them to finance us the OCR of the collections. So important is that it's all on the same technical platform. We use Visual Library, which is a private company. Semantics has developed it, and they give us the opportunity to make sure that it's not only you don't only digitize and have the image, but you are certain to keep the international standards, which allow then for the automatic data transformation and to make the images visible. They work with the highest standards. With help of their tool is called Visual Library. The web presentation, we work in the background with Visual Library Manager, where we can import automatically the images, be it from our scanner, be it from a company in Germany, or as we have seen now with the 1,000 books for the Freiman collection from New York, we get the images on a hard disk and we can import them. This enables the metadata exchange, which were, of course, the precondition that our images and our metadata can be seen in the research tools, in the Europeana, in the European Digital Library, and in other search engines, as in Google. It allows also this technical platform that every library can develop its own interface. That means that, for example, we can also in our we have a database for the Hebrew manuscripts where you can enter Hebrew names and for the authors or the titles, or you have you could do it in Cyrillic if you need it, or in other way. Or for the compact memory, for the periodicals, it allows you to show the structure of the periodical. For example, that's what I mean, the user end, then it allows for compact memory. The periodicals are built different than the Freiman. Then you search from the volume to the issue, and so on. And every database has its own search engine. For us, the future lies in now that we have presented these sources. We want to think how to get a reaction from the users, not only by sending emails or by using it, but of course by interactivity. How can they upload? We are thinking how to upload their knowledge, how to get now the consumer, to make the consumer producer within our database. And to make a possibility of integration it for the researchers into a virtual research environment where they can take out the resource and then can continue with it and work with it. And just in the end to show you, and I think that for us the most important thing was, because of the correct metadata, or according to international standards, you can search and find the things everywhere. And I think most of the students, even researchers, they work in Google and they don't go to the special collections. So you give in Google, and of course I looked, for example, where we are, the third number, of course you put in Judenstätigkeit, you get, and then you see, if you enter it in Google, you come back to our database, and then you can open the book and read it and print it, download it in PDF. And the same thing is with Europeana. I put in Abraham Geiger. You get the reference from the Frankfurt University Library, and then you are back into the database and back into the environment. But this is not interesting for the user. He wants his resource. But for us, it's interesting, of course, that it works according to standards. And the last, now, we have all the time compact memory has been our runner. This is a number of sessions for the last 1.5 years. And you can see Freiman, which is the light blue, is even used more, and it's a very high level of usage. It's about, in the peak, 14,000 sessions. In average, or if you're according to hit, we have about 1.4 million hits a month for this database. A month, yeah. Which I think is again, the technical base makes it possible. Thank you.
Catherine Eagleton is head of Asian and African Studies at the British Library, and her special responsibilities include also being the chair of the digitization project on Hebrew manuscripts.
Hello, I'm afraid I don't have any slides for you. I could have brought beautiful pictures of our manuscripts, but instead I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about some of the projects we're running. And it's in the nature of digital projects that they tend not to have some of the same richness in terms of the possibilities for PowerPoint. A bit of background, though, to the British Library. Some of you will know the collection very well. Some of you may not know it as well. It was formed from two major parent collections, one the British Museum, the other the India Office. And in both collections, you'll find material from Asia and Africa, from the area that my team look after. And among those, as you all know, is a very important collection of material in Hebrew and Yiddish and material relating to Jewish studies more broadly. That's curated by Lena Tahan, my colleague. She sends her apologies that she couldn't be here, but she wanted me to say hello to everybody, so I'll do it now, and then I don't have to say hello to everybody individually. And she works, of course, with Ulrike Koch, who's doing a lot of the cataloguing and working with the Yiddish collections in particular. And what is that collection then? It's around 75,000 printed books in Hebrew and Yiddish, from incunabula to current research publications, so we're still actively collecting material. And increasingly, our collecting of contemporary material is digital rather than printed. So there's new regulations in the UK that mean our illegal deposit material, deposited with the British Library, can now be in digital form instead of in printed form. So if a book is published in Hebrew in the UK, it's as likely now that we would collect it digitally as physically. And that's good news because we only have about 7 years of shelf space left. But it's also a problem because there are some kinds of books that just don't work as well digitally. Things like art books and photography books. And we also want to make sure we collect to show the transition to the digital. So the collection needs to not just be the books we need for the future, but also something that shows the change to the digital. It has to itself document that. So we're thinking about that. And then alongside the collecting of digital books, we're also collecting the internet. And what I mean by that is the same legislation means that we archive the UK web domain. So anything with .uk at the end, we archive it once a year. Anything that's relating to the UK or produced by organisations or people based in the UK, wherever it's hosted, we collect that once a year. So you can probably imagine we have enormous servers full of a copy of the internet. But what the legislation doesn't let us do is make that available on the internet. So that's our next challenge, is to try and improve access to the web archive because it's an incredible resource. And we do targeted bits as well. So when the Olympics were on in London, we were checking every day or two for new content and archiving that. When Nelson Mandela passed away, we were checking every day or two and archiving coverage around that. So it's a very active process, and it's a curated collection as well as a massive internet trawl. But the part of the collection that I would have been showing you if I'd have got slides isn't snapshots of web pages. It's, of course, our Hebrew manuscript collection, which has some real treasures in it. In total, there's around about 3,250 of them. We haven't counted recently, but it's around there. And there's about 7,500 Cairo Geniza fragments, some of them quite large fragments. And this is where the digitisation projects have been particularly active at the British Library. And I distinguish here between digital and digitised content. So digitised being where there's a copy of the original and there's an original. Digital content for me being born digital, so where there's no original somehow. So just a few examples. A couple of years ago, we had a project with support from the Friedberg Geniza project to digitise those Cairo Geniza. We have an ongoing project which is much broader than just our Judaica collections, and it's funded by Arcadia, and it's called the Endangered Archives Programme. Some of you might have heard of it. What it does is it supports digitisation for collections all over the world that are in some way at risk. The British Library, through its fund from Arcadia, pays for digitisation, pays for equipment, pays for training, and then takes in a copy of the images. And another copy is held locally. So it helps preserve that material, it helps digitise it, and make it available. And we hope also it builds skills in perhaps small libraries, in institutions that don't have capacity to run the kind of massive programmes that we've been hearing about here. One of those was a Geniza archive that was held in a Paris bank vault for example. So there's material in there of interest. You might have heard about a current project that we're running, which is to catalogue in TEI format and digitise 1,250 of our manuscripts. And that's about 430,000 images of Hebrew manuscripts. It's not close to the 6 million we just heard about, but it's a start, and it's a big chunk of our Hebrew manuscript collection. That's supported by the Polonsky Foundation and the Rothschild Foundation and others. And the kind of breaking news that I have for you, although I can't yet give you final figures, is that we're really delighted to be in the final stages of discussions with colleagues here at the National Library about extending that partnership to deepen what's been a very productive collaboration with the National Library to mean that we contribute all of our images to the new International Digital Library project, which you can see more about outside, and also do more documentation, more digitisation, get more of the collections to be available. So if, with a bit of luck and a following wind, we'll get upwards of 700,000 images, upwards of 2,000 manuscripts. We may be able to do more than that. We're just working on the figures at the moment. But watch this space, because it'll be really, really exciting, I think. I wanted to sort of spend 5 minutes before I finish now talking about a couple of things. One is some more to do with digitisation and around why we do it. We've heard that it's preservation and it's access, and it's sometimes the two together. So, for example, at the British Library, we have a big sound collection on legacy formats, most of which can't be read anymore because the particular audio player doesn't exist anymore. So they need converting before we can no longer hear them at all. That's the most extreme version of preservation. We think we might have 15 years to save our sound collection. And we're doing the same for newspapers, which are obviously on acid-bleached paper often, so they just crumble. And we're working very hard to preserve those. Our work with our Hebrew manuscripts is more to do with access, but that collection also has in it some fragile and very damaged items. So we're working to make sure that we do digitisation for access, but also make sure that we preserve material. And of course, if we digitise, we can then slightly restrict access to the original to protect it. Because one thing we've found is there's no clear picture on whether digitisation drives down access to the original or up. We've had some parts of the collection where ordering by readers has gone up because people have suddenly become aware of what's there. In other areas, it's gone down. And one of the areas where it's gone down is our printed book collection. So if you're reading a 19th century printed book and you can see a digitised version, for most researchers, that's enough. And we have a partnership with Google Books, which we're doing large quantities of our printed book collection. And the current batch includes a batch of Hebrew books we're hoping to be able to do. And we hope that'll be the start of putting our Hebrew printed book collections through into digital form a bit more. Now, those of you who've tried to access the British Library's digital collections and digitised collections will know that our technology has got some work to do to make it really easy for discoverability and for people to see what we have. So we're working on a lot of the really underpinning technology at the moment. We heard just now about how the right technology makes all this work or doesn't. We're trying to streamline things so that it works better. We're merging some of our back-end systems, and we're developing a new image viewer that can handle, for example, images of scrolls more easily, which is crucially important to our Hebrew manuscripts project. We've become aware, though, that there isn't out there a really good, rich, fully featured scroll viewer, a kind of open source product that libraries could use. So I wanted to put a plea out while I'm here to say, if you'd be interested in collaborating with the British Library to build something really spectacular for scroll viewing, we're interested in talking to other people with the same kind of viewer problem. So we're thinking of something there where you could pull up a digitized version of a scroll and navigate within the scroll in detail. That's not very easy at the moment. Anyway, enough of my kind of sales pitch. What I wanted to end by talking about was the fact that digitized and born digital collections are a good start. More of them means people can see more of our collections. They can access content from anywhere. They can be having a cup of tea in the morning in their house and look at something inspiring or unusual or interesting. Or they can be studying it in detail. But for me, that's not the end of it. This becomes really interesting when we build not just digital collections, but communities of users around those digital collections. So digitized collections are not only surrogates for the originals, but there's something they do that's distinctive. They can do things that, looking at the originals, however long and however hard, can't do. So, for example, we have an imaging specialist in our conservation team who uses digital imaging techniques to uncover layers under palimpsests and to see things on manuscripts that it just isn't possible to read any other way. We also have a team of what are called digital curators. And what they don't do is curate our digital content. What they do is encourage people to use it and to use our digitized material. So they do things like they work with computer game designers to make games inspired by our collection. They recently released 1 million images on Flickr with no copyright restriction at all as an experiment to see what people would do with them. And it's been spectacular what they've done with them. And we found that by releasing it with no restrictions at all, including allowing commercial use, something interesting happened, which is that people came back and told us what they did, which they don't do if they clear rights from you. So there's something about being very generous and just saying, have it, that meant that we've now got this community who come back to us and credit us without being asked to, which is nice. But I think, for me, a lot of the digital humanities work is really interesting. So data mining, digital humanities tools for understanding the collections in different ways. A lot of that digital humanities work is rather focused on European languages, for my liking. A lot of it's got work to do in some of the other languages and other scripts that my team look after. And we're making a start on that. So the current Hebrew Manuscripts project will be recruiting soon. So if you know anyone who needs a job, we're about to hire. We're about to recruit a fellow to use digital humanities techniques to engage with our digitized Hebrew manuscripts, to see what might be possible, to experiment a bit, and to have some fun with them. And that's ultimately the point. We don't want to be doing all of this. We want to show what's possible, but then we want to know what other people can do. We hope they'll do things we haven't even thought of yet. So watch this space for more becoming available, but also for people doing interesting things. And do let me know if you hear about people doing interesting things with our collection, because that ultimately is the point. Thank you.
Sabina Magrini is the director of Biblioteca Palatina in Parma, and she's one of the initiators of the collaboration on the digitization of Hebrew manuscripts between the National Library of Israel and Palatina. We need some help here?
Well, yes, letter B. Sorry, press the letter B.
Press where?
Letter B.
Letter B. Okay, where's B? Okay.
No, it's not me.
Perfect.
Okay. So, good morning to everybody, and thanks to the organizers of this conference for inviting me to give my contribution to this first panel. As probably most of you know, this is the Biblioteca Palatina in Parma. It was first opened in 1761, first founded in 1761 and opened to the public in 1768. Now, it is probably quite unique in Italy because, differently from other libraries, historical libraries in Italy, it started from scratch, in the sense that Philip of Bourbon, who was the person who started the story, had a brother, an older brother. The older brother, Charles, who was Duke of Parma, before going to Naples to become King of Naples, took away all the treasures of the family. And among these, the statues, the pictures, the manuscripts, the books that were existed in Parma. They belonged to the Farnese, his mother. He considered them a family treasure and brought them away. So Philip had to start the library from scratch. And Philip, the birth of this library was part of an intellectual cultural program inspired by Guillaume de Tuyot, his minister. For this reason, he entrusted Paolo Maria Pasciaudi with an important charge, that of creating go shopping, manuscripts, printed books, whatever. Financial shortage meant that Pasciaudi was not in the position to buy ready-made collections, so he bought each single manuscript, each single printed book. And for this library, in the palace that you saw, was employed that man over there, the Petitot, and that is what they created. This is the first gallery of the Palatina library. Now, Pasciaudi began the story, but the real man who's important for us now is Pezzana, Angelo Pezzana. Angelo Pezzana ruled, let's say, the library as its director for the first half of the 19th century. He was luckier than Pasciaudi inasmuch as he had a very important sustainer, financial sustainer, Maria Luigia, the great Duchess of Parma, who we are all extremely grateful still now. And thanks to her, it was possible for Pezzana to buy, in 1816, the Gian Bernardo de Rossi collection. Now, this collection that I think everybody here knows about, is extraordinary. It contained about 1,464 printed books, 1,624 manuscripts, 1,432 of which in Hebrew. He was a professor of Oriental languages at the University of Parma. He was quite lucky because having the Jesuits been sent away, they were hiring new staff and he became one of the teachers there. And as often happens to intellectuals, he was very preoccupied for his future in his old age. And so that is why he sold his collection to the library, but at a condition that he could continue studying his manuscripts. And that is why the Palatina has this collection. One of the treasures is here, but it's banal, let's say. Every manuscript of the De Rossi collection is magnificent. Amongst these, there are two extremely important manuscripts that we have a Mishnah that comes from Otranto, the southern of Italy, and it dates to 1072, 1073, and it's just simply called Mishnah Parma A, for its importance. Now, from the time of Pasciaudi to now, obviously the library has increased, and to date it owns about 6,000 manuscripts and about 3,000 incunabula. Obviously, they're not all they're not only Jewish. We have Latin and Greek and other Oriental languages. But certainly the presence of the De Rossi collection has in a certain sense given a specific character to the Palatina Library in Italy. It is amongst our libraries one of the most Oriental, let's say. And that is why in the 90s, when the Italian state bought a certain group of about 40 manuscripts from Ethiopia, the Mordini collection, the state decided to give this collection to the Palatina Library. So a part of this collection of manuscripts, 16th century books and incunabula has been catalogued, indexed digitally and digitized in itself. And so certainly not as soon as happened in Frankfurt or at Harvard, but round about year 2000, in Parma we have been creating databases concerning the manuscripts. For example, we have a whole set of descriptions of our manuscripts that are on a database, in a database called Manus Online. We have a bibliographical database that is, let's say, the weakest link, the weakest element of our collections. We have, because of the importance of the presence of Giambattista Bodoni in Parma, who was this magnificent, famous typographer who lived and worked in our town, we have a museum in the library, which collects his paperwork, his editions, and also his instruments of work. All this has been catalogued and digitized. we have a database concerning 19th century journals and another database concerning our magnificent collection of medieval up until the 19th century bindings. So, as happens in Frankfurt, different collections concerning different objects with different degrees of indexing that have been created in different historical moments for different purposes, let's say, and with different founding. So when I started work in Parma, that was in spring 2012, I thought it was very, very important to do what has already been said, one portal for many collections, in order to create. At that time, we were not already, well, maybe not so far ahead in Parma, but we were thinking of a cloud, not knowing that it was called a cloud. And in any case, it was supposed to be an instrument that allowed integrated access to all these different collections. One catalogue which one can peruse through one search engine and connected to one visualizer that will allow visualizing all the different digitized objects. Now, I can say that this is the physical the physical place where our manuscripts are kept, the Sala de Rossiana, and this is the virtual place where you can get access to our manuscripts. It is the platform from where you can gain access to the different materials, our correspondence, archival material, our manuscripts, our journals, and our printed books, all from this first platform. And obviously then you can use various access tools to arrive to the objects. You're seeing this for the first time. It has not been publicized yet. We're going to present it to the public on 3rd of December. Why? Because 3rd of December is the day in which in Italy we celebrate, it's an accessibility day. It is really thought for people who are disabled, people who are impaired. But giving access to our collections via the internet is a way of opening our building to everyone. And these images are, let's say, compliant with the famous triple I, Internet Image Interoperability. So we do really hope that everybody can get access to these images. Now, the fact that this material is on our platform does not mean that we are working as a library on our own. What is very important to stress is, although I am convinced that a certain type of researcher will always go to the web page, the portal of the library, because he knows that the material he is interested in is kept in that library. And so the web page is, let's say, the virtual version of the blocks, of the material blocks of the library. It is also important to, at the same time, work together with great platforms, national platforms like our Internet Culturale. We work hand in hand with the Ministry of Culture, but also with international platforms such as Europeana. And in fact, as Lena said, a part of our, before when we were speaking, she knew about our collections because she has worked with our collections for Judaica in Europeana. Now, what does so all that we have done, for example, this is what you can see for our manuscripts. If you look for the manuscript 697 of a Parma collection, we have scanned, we have created a sort of a PDF that can be searched full text with a description of the manuscript. But at the same time, you can open up to the link of the digitized manuscript because we are collaborating, as Lena said, with the great project by the National Library of Israel in the digitization of the De Rossi collection. Now, not only you can get access to the manuscript, but you can also in the same way get access to our Judaica collection from the platform of the library that works more, in a clearer, simpler, more direct way than Internet Culturale. And also here, with the use of these viewers, it is possible to navigate in the page and enlarge what you're interested in. But all this is done through collaboration. We collaborate with national cultural institutions. We collaborate with international institutions. But collaborating means working very hard because, as already has been said by my colleague of Frankfurt, it is extremely important to deliver objects with metadata of interoperability. We are working with Israel. We are working a lot with Spain. In Italy, for our metadata system, we work in MAG, that are a fixed set of metadata that are fixed by our the Institute of a ministry who is concerned in cataloguing. But at the same time, when we work with Spain and Israel, we got to translate everything into MARC and to METS. And the images that for the Italian standard of the ministry have to be JPEGs. When we work with Israel and when we work with Spain, are going to be TIFFs, pyramidal TIFFs for copyright purposes. And so we really stress our ICT technicians from this point of view. Another important issue is preservation. In Italy, luckily, at least in the region of Emilia-Romagna, where the library is, there's a system on. So the material of the Palatina library to date, from September, let's say, is regularly consigned to the dark archives organized by Emilia-Romagna, by the region Emilia-Romagna. But on a nationwide scale, the situation is different. There are two important projects that are going on with the two national central libraries. By the way, in Italy, there are two national central libraries in Rome and Florence. But they are still in a project phase. And so it's different being a project, a pilot project, and it's different being a system. Luckily in Emilia, it's a system. And luckily also here, I was reading from the panel of the National Library, also here it is a system. And in fact, it's one of the elements that attract people to contribute as well to the project of a National Library because their files are going to be refreshed, are going to be kept alive. So collaboration through metadata, preservation issues are important, and at last, an appeal. This is a different database. It's a database of another important Italian library, that is the Biblioteca Medici Laurenziana in Florence. Here, the manuscripts have been, the manuscripts of the core collection of the Plutei, about 3,900 manuscripts, have all been digitized. We won't go through that, but what I want to show you is that it has in Florence there is a database of bibliography. For each and one of the manuscripts that has been digitized, a bibliography has been collected through the perusal of what is consigned, what has been given to the library. And authors are eager to give their works to the library in book form, photocopy form, or PDF form, whatever it is, because their work is then recorded in the bibliography and it is associated to the manuscript's digitization in the database. So you look up your Pluteo 131 Bible and you will see that it has been studied vis-a-vis abstracts, and for each abstract, then you can get the detail of the book that's speaking about it. Now, I have a dream, quoting somebody else. I would like that this bibliography could be associated to the manuscripts digitized and present in the database of the Palatina Library and, of course, in the National Library of Israel. And that means that the people who are studying these manuscripts give us at least a copy, a PDF of what they are studying, or converge it here in the National Library of Israel, and we can work together in order to create this really powerful tool for all scholars of these manuscripts. Thank you for your attention.
Right, well, we can now... Yes, we are now open for questions and comments.
I'm Rini Goldsmith. I work in the National Library, and I would like to ask Violet about accessibility to the digital collection of Judaica that they have in Harvard, because we've seen from the other speakers that that almost all of their digital collections are available online, and I want to know about Harvard's policy of making it accessible through the internet or through. It is
via the visual information access, that a database that on Harvard website, that you can, all the 6 million and other images that Harvard own are online. Most of the collection, out of the 6 million that we have, close to 5 million are open for everybody to view. Only the posters we have limited, because of copyright, limited access, and you can view it only on the thumbnail. We are in the process now of loading all the audio and the video that will be limited only by password for Harvard privileges access because of copyright. We are not allowed to put it online, and no one allowed to put that online. But all the images are open to the public, and all the microfilm maps, because they are, although we got a permission from the Central Zionist Archive to open it widely, we chose not to do that because of there are many maps that we thought, because it's related to Israel, could be used in a way that we don't want them to use at this point. So it was a decision of having not a Harvard-owned collection, making it secure to protect from natural reasons. But that's the only collection that is not open.
Thank you, Violet. Questions? Over there, yes. Oh, yes.
Sorry, who?
Yeah, I can manage the room, I think. Thank you very much, all of you. But the real question, of course, and I know it's only partly the theme of this panel, the real question is, what are we going to do with all these digital collections? I mean, the last speaker mentioned at least some sort of integration of content, of the usage of these collections, and the let's say, combining everything that we have here. One of the problems, and I've said that in public before, is that as long as I don't know what is around digitally, we may well assume that many of our users won't know either what is around digitally. So I think that the first challenge that we have is to make the audiences aware of the presence of all these wonderful digital collections. And the second problem that we have is, how do we integrate new research questions that have not been answered, have not even been put yet properly. They've certainly not been answered, and they're hovering above everything that we're doing. Because I, for one, have suddenly access to hundreds of thousands of images, literally, that would have taken me 25 years to travel to see, and I can see them 24/7 on my iPad, if it's not flash-based, if the connection is working, if there's no flash in the website. But nevertheless, so I think that we are also reaching a point as colleagues here together where we should really start to integrate the digital humanities research, and not digitization, but digital humanities research, and the formulation of new questions that arise through these digital collections, because that's really the point that we're reaching right now. Because there's so much information, it's mind-boggling, but it's also debilitating. I don't know where to start. So
Thank you. That's a very good comment. And in fact, we have begun talking about it with Emile and Rahel, and we are very open to widening the conversation. How to start a project on digital humanities in Jewish studies, how to start an initiative. Really, it would have to be a network of people willing to work together and so on. So, any other comments on this particular subject? Yes?
Following the last question, my question is also if there's any way of knowing there's a connection about the different libraries and the different centers that are doing this digitalization. Maybe they are both working on the same document. Maybe they are expending money that has to do with the same material. I don't know, that's a question. And how can we help in this search of if we can make complementation these kind of meetings maybe help us to know about what's existing, but maybe we're losing a lot of them, and those are working maybe alone and not knowing that this material exists. I know that you can get into internet and look, but you can come up with 1,000 of answers, maybe, I don't know, that are speaking of this fragmentation. If this is, that's the question. Is this being taken into account?
Yes, if I may answer up to a point this comment. Initiatives like Europeana, Europeana.eu. It's a European platform for libraries, museums, and archives. The idea is to integrate the data, to link the data to the central database of Europeana, so that the user can indeed find everything and anything almost to do with a particular subject. The search... yes, but it actually, we are now integrating Jewish collections in the United States. We are working with ZIVO, with the Leo Baeck Institute. We hope to work with Harvard. We work with the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. So in fact, the subject matter is not necessarily limited to Europe. And certainly the collections, we are mostly interested in European collections, but could be any collection of Jewish heritage. So this is one of the answers. Of course, forums such as this conference will also play that role where information is exchanged, new collaborations come together and are carried out. But I think, yes, it is a concern because there are more and more digitized material and perhaps not enough networking when it comes to researching and using it. Yes.
I'd like to ask Catherine about the British Library partnership with Minecraft and how you're approaching gamification.
Sure. Essentially, the way we work with game developers is to set a challenge which is in the form of a competition each year. And we provide a theme, which this year was to do with an exhibition that we have on Gothic literature. And we provide objects, we provide images, we provide sounds from our sound archive. And then there's prizes for the teams that do the best entry. And it's mainly to do with creating a 3D world. We don't require them to build the game mechanics. It's to do with building the world. And it's just amazing what people do with maps and pictures and sounds. This year's competition has just been announced, and so there are blogs and things about it online as well. So it's worth having a look, and I can tell you where to look if you need help finding it. But it's amazing because people do things you would never predict, which helps keep your ideas fresh when you work with these collections all the time.
Yes, Nanette, over there.
With regard to the British Library, when you send out all your various things, these wonderful things that you send out, and you're interested in what people do with them, aren't you concerned about what people might do with them? I mean, it's the positive and the negative. I mean, just to give you one example, at Yale we have at Yale, we have the Holocaust video archives, and that's a real big question that they're asking. what to do. Make them available everywhere, or because they really feel a sense of misuse as well as proper use, or whatever that word, use for learning and for and misuse. So I'm not quite sure, putting it all out there and see what interesting things people do with them. I don't quite understand that exactly.
Sure. If I'd have had longer, I would have said that we do assess the risk with each collection that we put out openly. We make sure that we're confident that the balance is right. So the balance between the benefits of access, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, I feel like making difficult material, or material that might be on subjects or with content that might be riskier, sometimes it's more powerful than kind of keeping it hidden. But it has to be a careful decision, because some material could go really wrong if you release it. In relation to the 1 million images that we put out, they were from 19th century books, so they were very low risk. The main thing we had to think about was nudity, because we had no way of checking each of the images to see if any of them were of naked people. And we had imagined there would be sort of outraged parents from all over the world writing to us. And in the end, nothing like that happened. But for other material, we are much more careful. So the example of maps is a good one. We tend to be quite careful with contemporary mapping. And an example that might be of interest, we have the India Office map collection, which is still some of the best mapping of places like Kashmir and territories that are very, very difficult in terms of border disputes and all the rest. And so we're careful about that material, absolutely. We don't just throw everything out with no consideration to the risk, but we do sometimes put material out and think the balance is right. So the risk somebody might do something problematic is more than outweighed by all the really amazing, imaginative and totally unproblematic things people do.
Could you give an example of what amazing thing happened from something that you put out there?
Well, from this 1 million image set, we've had people have made animations. Somebody made an art installation that went to Burning Man in Nevada this year. People have written, using our digitized newspaper content, there's somebody who's working on trying to find out why Victorian jokes were funny by doing kind of automated analysis. But that's the kind of thing. It's scholarly, it's artistic, it's sometimes commercial, but that's fine. We're pretty relaxed about that.
I think that the critical mass of information that you put out there create not only opportunity for research, but opportunity for creativity that otherwise cannot be created unless you put that all thing out. You never know who will be inspired by what. And I know you look at the world from a point of a research library, as I do. Yale is the same as Harvard. For us, it's not an issue. We never worried about putting for the public. We're not a national library or a public library. But even for us to put it out there for all the scholars in the world, create the way that you put critical mass, bring any research to another notch in terms of inspiration, ability to understand phenomenon, because we put a critical mass. It's amazing. There is no really risk at that. I completely.
Okay. One more question.
This is not a question, but a comment, and very, very important source, and speaking especially for Italian Judaism. In the study of Italian Jews are the register, the Pinkasim, many of them in Central Archive for the History of Jewish People, because speaking for Italy, I think 70% of the history of the document on which Italian scholars studied history of Italian Jews were outside sources, ad extra, not produced by Jews. Also important, but the Pinkasim are a very amazing source produced at intra of the Jews, And so we can understand that when Napoleon arrived, the Jews of Lugo are at all not glad. That if the inquisitor go to Lugo, they, in a deliberation, give a sum to invite to a dinner with fish, to eat fish, because inquisitor like fish. Is an extremely important source from inside, produced by the Jew, of great importance to put together outside sources.
Thank you. Yes?
I just had a very general question. I would like to hear from some of you about the efforts that you make to make your work known. How do you let people know what you're doing? How do you let people know about these collections and their availability? I mean, when we find out about new collections, say the ones that I've heard about today, if they're not already cataloged as a collection in OCLC or in our library catalog, then we would do a full cataloging record so that students and faculty could discover them in our catalog. So I would say, yeah.
Okay, shall we start with Violet?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, well, I mean,
how do you?
How do you publicize your collections, and how do you make them more discoverable? So you think everything is in Google? I mean, in our students, we try and, when I hear about a collection, for instance, like the collection in the Palatina library, I might do ask our catalogers to do a full cataloging record for the collection, so that it will be discoverable as a collection, not just as the individual items. So
Well, it's
am I being clear?
Yes.
Okay.
if I'm be very specific about Harvard, you can have a record that will catalog Harvard
poster
Judaica.
collections or something.
There's nothing like that. Harvard Judaica is part of the university. Digital happened to be that the university have 7 million, 6 million on them Judaica, but it's still within the VIA, the University
But
Visual
the poster collection,
Database.
for instance, you could make
Part
a
of the
record that
VIA
says-
also. No, it's
says
not.
We have a small description of the collection, that we have 70,000 posters digitized.
Right, but if you get into the VIA website at Harvard, you will get each collection, what they have, including the Judaica. So,
Yeah, well, but some kind
but
of
you can have a record that will link to that specific.
You know, maybe for, like example, as Frankfurt does and other partners in Europeana, you do a cataloging for the object, for the book, for the specific item. But the moment you reach the specific item, you are back in the environment. That means because I think people don't look for collections, or students or researchers. I think they look for what they're interested in. They look for the specific. And the moment, for example, I think for us the way is to guarantee the standard metadata. That means that every item, and I think this is much more important, that every item has the correct metadata. And then the moment just let me finish the sentence. The moment you enter this item, then you see that this item is part of a collection, and then you can click on another about the collection, and then you get a short history that there are, let's say, a number of manuscripts. If you didn't know that the library has Hebrew manuscript, and then you can go on and you can look, manuscript after manuscript. But I don't think that the putting in metadata of collections would be much of interest. In search engines, because as I said, I don't think that people will say, what is there about Hebrew manuscripts or what? No, they look for something, or Israeli posters. They have an idea, they have a topic, and then, but this is the way, you have always to go back to the origin.
Just one small short thing. Specifically with regard to your collections,
Yes.
I did make a record for a compact memory, so that people could know that there is this corpus of Jewish newspapers from Germany.
Yeah, but if you use one of the journals of compact memory, you have always a button where it says about compact memory, and then you could click on the button, and then you could see, what is in. Thank you very much that you did it, but.
I've actually had people access it that way.
Okay, so
before
it's
there
good.
was just that collection, the German Jewish newspapers on microfilm. So now they know that.
Right, that's good. Maybe it's, we had the other, because it's doing metadata is very expensive because you need people, and this is the most expensive. You could do much more digitizing if we had somebody who would do the metadata.
It's a fraction of
So I'm always afraid in our library that we have collections, but then nobody bothers anymore to do metadata on the specific items, and it gets lost. When we buy microfilm collections, who will sit and do all the microfilm? So that's maybe what we try to do.
Catherine, you want to add to this?
Yeah, I want to just reiterate the point about discoverability is crucial. When people search, they've got to find it. Absolutely. But also, one of the things that we're really excited about is linking. Somebody else mentioned about linking collections together. So things like union catalogues, kind of old technology, but really important. Digital, like the Digital Library Initiative here, that brings together material. But the big way that we promote our digitized collections is actually we have a very active blog where we feature things that we've been digitizing, things that we've found. And quick plug, we have a Twitter account, which I can give you the handle for if you like. But if you just flick through, you can see we quite regularly feature something we've just digitized with a little bit of information about it. And what's lovely is you get feedback from readers almost straight away. And feedback, we have a Persian manuscripts project running alongside the Hebrew manuscripts project. And we had the most wonderful email from somebody in Tehran who just said, there's no way I can come and see your manuscripts, but I'm happy you're doing a great job looking after them and that I can see them. And that really makes it worth it. It's one person reacting to one thing we put out on a blog, but it helps get word out there.
I would just want to say similar things to my colleagues. Certainly, for us, I agree totally with what Frankfurt said, with what Raquel Heuberger said. I think from experience, researchers research all bottom up from the manuscript in particular, or the theme, the topic in particular, and that is why Google, the total transparency and openness of the data we put on the platform in Google is fundamental, because you digit that name and via Google you arrive to the entry in the catalogue, and from the entry in the catalogue you arrive in the catalogue, and you have all the presentation then of the library, the collection, the tools, whatever. Or the person knows vaguely that that object is in that library and consequently goes to the web page and the platform of the library. So you start from the top and you go downwards. And that's one possibility. And certainly, since these... in the Palatina, we had an enormous problem in autumn 2012, a beginning of a fire. And so that meant the library was closed, and we had to collect, had to do lots of fundraising for the library. And in that occasion, we really, and that was about 2012, we discovered the power of Twitter and Facebook. And since then, in order to make our collections alive, notwithstanding the fact that for a certain number of months the monumental area of the library was closed, we have systematically posted twice a week pictures, interesting pictures, unusual, inspiring, a cup of tea, unusual, inspiring, whatever, but also interesting from a researcher's point of view with a brief description. We have noticed that in months, our followers on Twitter and Facebook and whatever have increased enormously. And this has been useful for the fund collecting, but it has also been useful because we have gained lots of comments and feedback on our collection themselves. So when we organize events or we put new material on our platform, people immediately know about it. And that is an extremely good way of promoting what we are doing, I think.
I think we have to bring the session to an end now. So I just wanted to thank all the Violet and all the presenters for their and perhaps we can continue the discussion through the other sessions.
Thanks to the conference participants. Toda rabah. Conference participants, conference invitees are invited downstairs for lunch until 2 o'clock. And then we have a kind of less formal period. I'm sure everybody has seen the posters that are outside.